France is dumping Zoom and Teams. Have you caught this one in your news?
Yeah. This is huge. We've got an interesting conversation today, which I think we're billing as falling back in love with your CTO role.
David, is your newsfeed as full of humanoid robots as mine is right now?
Yeah, the best investment you can make is build a strong team around you, because otherwise you will never get the bandwidth.
But please don't join us if you're not excited about working circa 70-hour weeks.
AWS. Should we do like a hand-raising system or something?
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the CTO Lens for this week. Welcome, Sophie. Nice to see you. Hopefully I'm not as grumpy as I was last week because I've got over my man flu.
You don't look grumpy at all, and you weren't grumpy last week. So as always, it's a pleasure to see you.
Excellent. And you. I'm back to my usual chirpy chappy self. So hopefully that'll be good for our listeners. So talking about our listeners, we've got lots of events coming up for our listeners. You obviously would love you to subscribe and follow this, but also we've got our Women Tech Leaders event on the 5th of March. That's very, very close around the corner. And I think there's lots of people going to that. So get in on that one quickly. And then the main London Tech Leaders event coming up, the Evolving CTO Mandate. And this one is talking about the role of the CTO, which we'll be doing with our guests in a few moments, actually. The Evolving CTO Mandate is 25th of March. Look out on all the socials for that. That's a really good one. That'll be number 23 of London Tech Leaders. Yeah, get along to those two, Women in Tech or the Evolving CTO Mandate. Have a good time. We have got the lovely Luke has come back. He'll be joining us for the midweek mid-episode game. Not that Will didn't do a great job for the last 2 weeks, but Luke is coming back to as the quizmaster extraordinaire. So we'll see how that goes. Sophie, what's been happening in technology news this week? What have you spotted?
Oh, lots of stuff's been going on. Something that caught my eye, and actually it was in line with this sort of digital sovereignty issue we were talking about last week, is that France is dumping Zoom and Teams. Have you caught this one in your news?
Oh, yeah. This is actually, I only picked up on this earlier today, but it's huge. It's a real kind of, and it just made me think, this is really logical. Why isn't everybody doing this? So give us the background for our listeners.
Yeah, it is. It is. So this is coming, and it's not just France. This was on ABC News, the particular article that caught my eye, and it was France's civil service. They're moving away from these kind of big tech US-owned Zoom and Teams as an example for their video conference software. But there are actually a number of other examples, for example, in Austria, who I think have stopped using Microsoft Office, and in Germany as well. So a lot of this kind of activity happening in the EU, where these sort of sensitive government organizations are concerned about digital sovereignty, data protection, things like that. And they're making moves to step away from the risk that incurs. Something that I actually didn't notice that was mentioned in this article that might interest you was, and I'll actually just read you the quote because it's really fascinating and I hadn't connected the two, but the quote was, "A decisive moment came last year when the Trump administration sanctioned the International Criminal Court's top prosecutor after the tribunal based in The Hague in Netherlands in the EU, of course, issued an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who, of course, is an ally of President Donald Trump. And the sanctions led Microsoft to cancel, Karim Khan was the prosecutor at the ICC. They canceled his email, and that apparently was the sort of first move that started EU organizations being really, really concerned that potentially the US has almost a kill switch where, you kind of build infrastructure, it relies on these big tech companies, but actually like that, they can take it away. So that was a really fascinating example for me of actually, the possible risk that we are talking about when we talk about, digital sovereignty or reliance on these US big tech organizations.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing sort of reaction in one way, right? But also somehow just obvious, right? It just, I think it's just highlighted. I've been doing with one of my roles, I've been doing a lot of cybersecurity stuff this week, checking where we're good, where we're not so good, etc., etc. And here I am thinking, we've got to protect against outsiders coming in and compromising us. So Microsoft could just switch us off, If they just, if we just decided we were, I don't know, we didn't like the color of Trump's trousers or something, they could just switch us off. It's like, how do I plan for that? Yeah. And the French government would say, well, you plan not to use Microsoft, right? And so you just think to yourself, we're not political and we're not commentating on Trump's policies, as it were, but here is an administration which is making complete countries stop using their core technology. Now you're thinking, what if they stop buying Teslas, right? And then you're thinking, you've got all sorts of connotations there. And I have a colleague who's American who was traveling back to the States from Europe last week. And on her way from America to Europe, she was on a massive plane, completely chocker full. On her way back, she had 10 rows free to herself. And she was curious about it. So she Googled it. And something like in the last 6 months, there's been a 12% drop of Europeans going to America. And when you dig into that a little bit, they're being advised by their workplaces and travel agents, it's just not a good time to. And so you just sort of like, I know, that administration is all about make America great again and all of that kind of stuff. And, good luck to them with whatever they're doing. But have they thought some of this through, right? And the impact to technology, and then coming back to us, the reliance we have on these American-based institutions. I don't know. It's definitely worth a rethink in our technology strategies, right?
I think it is. I mean, I think it's worth asking the question. And for me, something that stood out as always, and it kind of came from completely the wrong place, but I'm very good at Google Meets. I'm not so good at Teams.
Right.
And there's a long period. My mum does this as well. She'll call me up and say, I have a Teams meeting next week. And can you help me work out if it's going to work on the day? And you kind of have this, the more you have a fractionation of systems and the less interoperable they become, the less collaborative we become as individuals, as, countries and organizations. And there was actually a quote that was in this same article from a civil service minister in France that said, we cannot risk having our scientific exchanges, our sensitive data, and our strategic innovators exposed to non-European actors. But I mean, particularly talking about scientific exchanges, scientific collaboration across borders, across continents is a fundamental part of scientific progress. So it kind of, to me, it sounded as if it was an incredibly strong anti-collaborative statement. And we're sort of moving from a position of, well, we're concerned about tech risk, or we're concerned about sort of data sensitivity, through to we're concerned about America as, as kind of one finite homogeneous unit, which it absolutely is not. So I'm really interested in what we're going to see as the sort of negative externalities of potential separation between the US and the EU from these moves.
I think that's spot on. And just touching into another news story, it's not just Europeans and beyond who are worried about what America are doing with ICE and technology and all that kind of stuff, but actually Americans within America are worried about it as well. So Google staff, there's a news story about this week, have called for the firm to cut ties with ICE in America. And in particular, they're also going further and saying they want transparency over what Google's technology is being used for inside the US government. So they're not just saying, hey, we want to, make a nice, pretty statement that says, oh yeah, we don't condone any of that ICE activities going on. They're actually saying to their employer, if our tech is being used to help further the ICE agenda, we're out. We're not interested in that. I mean, this is pretty strong stuff coming from Google's workers, Sophie, right?
Yeah, it is. And I have to say, we're not a political podcast. Obviously, David, you and I may hold our own perspectives, but I think ignoring even the direction of this challenge or these demands, it does raise a really interesting question about, technology. A lot of technology, particularly general AI at the moment, can be used in lots of different areas. And what is the accountability, right, responsibility of people involved in developing that technology? And, we're talking about Google, we're talking about a big old number of people. What is their opportunity to have a say in how that technology is used? I'll give you another example. I have a few friends who work in a company that's developing sort of this general AI to be used in the sort of physical world, for lack of a better term. And one of those opportunities is defense. And even within defense, there are some things we agree with and some things we don't agree with. So I think it raises some really, really complicated questions about, use of technology and who gets to make those decisions.
Yeah. And the Google workers have asked for this open letter, or they've sent an open letter demanding more transparency. The companies have done, some of these companies have done a little bit, right? So in October, Google said it removed several apps from its App Store, which allowed users to report and document sightings of ICE agents. And then Apple followed suit and did the same. So, where there's an obvious, conflict of their company's values conflicting with what ICE is trying to do. I think they're being obvious about that. But I'm guessing that there's lots and lots of employees in the government who are using Gmail and all that kind of stuff. So in their app life, I don't know how far this will go, right? So I mean, it will at some point. It comes down to, well, we're kind of relying on some of those big technologies and stuff to do the jobs. But again, linked to the whole French thing, I don't know. People just want to make different choices. They don't want to be governed by the big US anymore. They want to be able to make some more personal choices which align with their personal values. I think that was almost inevitable given the day and age we live in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of people or lack thereof, David, is your newsfeed as full of humanoid robots as mine is right now?
Yeah, so it is, and I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because I like tech and stuff like that. I do get drawn in by them a little bit, right? And then of course you spend half your time saying, "Is this an AI generated video or is this a real robot doing this?" Right? And basically, my conclusion is, if within 30 seconds of the start of the video the robot falls over or drops something, it's not AI generated. And if they don't, then it is AI generated. That's my kind of barometer for what's real and what's not at the minute. But they're all over the place, right? And at the minute, it's a little bit sort of still in exhibitions. It was at CES and all of that kind of stuff. And you keep seeing these videos, but some of them look damn good, right? Not aesthetically necessarily, but just like, and I saw this one the other day, and it's the limbs, it's how they're creating. It's freaking me out. They're just like, there was this one, and it said it was standing upright, and it said, right, lie down to go to sleep. And so you and I would just sort of go backwards and lower ourselves down our elbows.
Yeah.
And this one sort of twisted its joints, so it sort of collapsed gently into the floor, sort of thing. And I was like, that's a much better way of lying down. We should be able to do that. So now I've got robot joint envy. I don't know what's going on there, sort of thing. But yeah, my newsfeed is definitely full of falling over robots.
It is. It's really interesting. I caught a clip of one, and I can't remember when this actually happened, but it was the Optimus robot. So that's Elon Musk's sort of new robot they're investing in. And he fell over, but before he fell over, the robot did this kind of, for anyone who is listening rather than watching, he sort of put his hands up by his head and mimed almost as if he was lifting off some VR, AR goggles, and then fell backwards. And so everyone went, well, obviously, one, there's a man in there. There's not. There's sort of someone behind the scenes backstage who's sort of controlling it. And obviously Elon Musk says, absolutely no, it's all AI. But we never know. There have been many examples of AI and technologies in particular where you sort of say, this is absolutely amazing, and they go, no, we just have a giant warehouse full of people picking up the phone or typing into their computers. So I'm suspect as you are that you see a video, and if it works, you go, that video has been created through AI, and then you see a robot that's doesn't do brilliantly well, and you go, well, is the robot a real robot? Is it AI, or is there just someone backstage who's kind of controlling what it's doing? So I think there is more to be seen about the evolution of robots that we're observing at the moment.
I think so. Which leads us nicely on to our final news story for today, which is talking about warehouses full of people. Feels like we're going back to the start of the Industrial Revolution, or just before it, where people worked long, hard days, whether that was in a factory, down a mine, or whatever. But there's this new generation. It's called the AI gold rush, right? And basically, companies are starting to say to employees, potential employees, look, we're a sexy, exciting AI company. We're going to solve world peace, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But please don't join us if you're not excited about working circa 70-hour weeks in person, and then saying, with some of the most ambitious people in this case in New York City, right? So this is a story about actually pitching for people to come and work crazy long hours, and that's like a perk that you can come and work for a company as long as you're. So what do we think about this? Is it acceptable? Is it an abuse of people, or is it just like it's a gold rush? If you want to be in it, you've got to be in it to win it big time.
I think it is interesting. I'm in a couple of different minds about this. Firstly, for me, reading this article and seeing the reference to New York is a city of extremes. If you want to work 70-hour weeks, New York is the kind of place you'll go to and you'll work as hard as you can and as much money as you can. And that's a big part of the culture there. But reflecting on it further, and particularly around this concept of 996. So 996 means you work from 9 to 9, 6 days a week. So you get your Sundays off. But other than that, you're doing 12-hour days.
Okay.
And it doesn't feel that different to a lot of companies I have worked at. Typically, you might be thinking like an 8 to 8, it's the same thing, but starting slightly earlier, not necessarily working on the weekends. And I'm trying to make sense of what is normal. I would love someone to do a survey of how many hours worked across different, sectors, countries, parts of the country, things like that. So we can understand whether we look at 72 hours and go, gosh, that sounds like a lot of hours, when I know that the legal working week is, I think, 35, 36, something like that. But actually, how many companies are people working over? Is that just the normal environment? I will say I have a few friends who work at these sort of leading AI companies, and a few of them have recently been working until 3 a.m. most nights, which sounds like a lot of hours, probably more than 72 hours. But I know people who work in, sort of marketing and architecture, and it's nothing to do with AI and technology, and they're also working all of Saturday and all of Sunday. And so I'm kind of trying to make sense of, is this something that's very sort of shocking and new, or is it just the reality of work nowadays? Is something that really struck me about this sort of advert. As they
Yeah,
said, we're looking for people who are like athletes, and they want to work that much. And if you do, fantastic. But if you don't and you're being forced, then it's a really different situation. And I think, there's potentially a lot of propaganda around everyone loves working this much. But actually, really, there's an accolade of working in a fancy company, or there's a big paycheck that mitigates a not fantastic work-life balance.
it is. It's difficult. Your point about whether it's choice or force is one thing, but sometimes there's peer pressure plays into that. So they're not really
Mm.
forcing you, but they kind of are forcing you. I think it depends. I think, if you pick a company that's going places and they're doing some exciting stuff, maybe you'll just work those kind of hours because it's exciting and you're into it,
Yeah.
and you work hard, play hard, all of that kind of stuff. There's some undertones of ugliness here for me in terms of it becoming the norm. And, I think it's hard enough getting the children of today encouraged to launch themselves into the world of corporate work, et cetera, without saying, oh, yeah, I'm the standard 72 hours a week. It's just like, what? Yeah. So I think I think it's okay if that's what you want to do. You want to play hard, work hard, you want to follow a dream, all that kind of stuff. You take your personal choices. But there, I think the businesses need to have a bit of responsibility here as well, and put some guardrails in place.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the final thing for me is to understand, is it a sprint or is it a marathon? Because if if you're bringing people in and they are working really extensive hours, they're not going to be able to do that and maintain their health and their sanity for long periods of time. And maybe it is a sprint when it comes to AI, and everyone's just trying to get to the market first, and you can sustain it for 6 months a year. But I do think I don't think this is a new trend that's going to settle and last by any means.
Is it a sprint? Is it a marathon? Is it a gold rush, or is it a bubble? See, that's the
Oh,
other thing. Imagine if you did 3 years of 70-hour plus weeks and it turned into a bubble. Oh,
oh, and all of your shares are gone. So when we come back, we will be talking to Lee Provoost, CTO of Flagstone, about his journey falling out of love and then falling back in love again with the CTO role. So stick around. Hi, Lee.
Hello.
How are you?
Lee.
Yeah, very well. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Lee. Thanks for joining us on the CTO Lens. We've got an interesting conversation today, which I think we're billing as falling back in love with your CTO role. So before we get into that, just be
Yeah.
nice to hear a little bit about you and your background, and do a little bit of an self-introduction, if that's okay, Lee.
Yeah, of course. So I've been with Flagstone, I think, almost 4 years now. Um, so it's been an interesting journey of first landing in the role, a kind of big growing fintech, and going through the usual motion of the first 2, 3 years of very kind of exciting challenges, and then thinking about what's next, which led to the topic of this conversation. And so previous roles have been a mix of building my own business to working for the UK government to other fintechs, so a bit of a mix of various industries. But I've always been at the kind of software development side of things, but a mix of consultancy, agency, fintech, big companies. So yeah, it's been a maybe slightly atypical career path for many people in tech, but you know, we are where we are, and I'm quite happy with where we got.
Amazing. And so we're really, really interested in your journey around, kind of getting to the CTO role, and, you sort of get there and you go, this is great. And then a little while later you say, well, maybe this isn't great. And obviously for you, you've kind of fallen out of love and fallen back into love. Could you walk us through that, that journey that you had coming into that first CTO position, and your experience of potentially that stopping being, or maybe never even in the first place being exactly what you expected it to be?
Yeah, so I think it's been a common theme where I joined a organization for a couple of years, and then after 2 to 3 years starting to think, what's next. And it's not that I stopped liking the job or stopped liking the company. It's more, I've done some of the things I wanted to do, maybe slightly getting a bit bored, and so some of the initial excitement went away. And because a lot of the roles I've pursued were all very kind of challenging type of roles where you come into a big growth organization and need to fix a whole bunch of fires and or help drive massive growth with hiring. And so the first couple of years are always exciting, right? You have all these big challenges, and at some point things start stabilizing a bit more, which usually means that you are doing a good job. And so I had the same thing when I joined Flagstone. Took over a technology organization from the previous CTO. The company at that point had 3 billion in assets. We currently have 19, so it's quite a big growth jump. Tripled the tech org during that time. But I think the first 2.5 years I also focused on decommissioning our legacy system, a 10-year-old system, rebuilt the whole system, changed the organization. And that was, of course, something that really gave me a sense of purpose, the big impactful things expected as a CTO. And so when I was then starting to plan my 2025 OKRs, that's when I realized, what am I going to do next? I mean, there's not really a whole lot more to be done than setting up the company for success by building a brand new platform and dealing with 10-year-old legacy. So that's why I reached that point thinking, what's next? And I luckily also recognized that, hold on, there seems to be a bit of a recurring theme and a pattern where I always seem to get to this same situation after 2 to 3 years.
So I think that's really interesting, Lee. Especially as a couple of the activities, like coming off of a legacy platform onto some kind of new platform. There's a lot of people who go, well, that's not very exciting. That's just like dealing with old tech, bit of new tech and stuff like that, right? Scaling a team, actually, that is exciting, but it's hard work, right? So the challenge, it seems more like a challenge rather than the excitement for you, right? You want something that you can add value to, something you can get your teeth into. And I think that probably resonate with most people. So do you think, did you just get bored because there weren't enough challenges? Was it personal? Was it you felt, no, it's interesting, I like the people I work with, but I can't add value anymore because I've added my value and I need to move? What was it that went through your mind that made you think, I need to change something?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because I do tend to get joy out of some of the things that others might see as kind of boring work. So for me, the opportunity to take a successful, profitable business that's been operating for 10 years and gone through this massive growth journey, the opportunity to then say, you know what, I can lead this initiative to get rid of 10 years of legacy, not just technology, but also business processes and commercial decisions, and actually set us up for the next 10 years of growth. I find that incredibly exciting, because it also reflects the type of impact that I feel, is expected from a CTO, a C-level exec operating on that level for a fintech of a certain size and maturity. So the type of things that maybe some other CTOs would feel this isn't really the kind of sexy tech innovation work. No, that really, really appeals to me. So I think you're right to point out that maybe some of the kind of lack of a sense of purpose came from not having another big meaty type of thing ahead of me, regardless whether it was the kind of quote unquote boring work or the kind of more sexy innovation work.
Yeah. And so where did that lead you then? I think you mentioned that you had maybe it was the beginning of 2025. I can't remember if you said OKRs or New Year's resolutions. I guess they're similar things in some ways. And so it sounds as though you got to a point where you had identified this kind of pattern or behavior or just a preference of yours that, I like these really big meaty challenge. I mean, where did that lead you? What change did you make? What happened next?
I think the first thing was acknowledging that there was this pattern and making a decision whether I wanted to stay with Flagstone or not. And I, after some reflection, I came to the realization I really like the team, I really like the company, really like my peers on the leadership team. And I also felt that there was so much more to be done. And so something else that played in the back of my mind was um, long before COVID, I spent 5-6 years building my own health tech business with a couple of friends. And um, part of me always felt a certain unfinished business of, I could have had the opportunity to turn this into a long-term success. And due to circumstances out of my control, that was not possible. And with Flagstone, it felt like, actually, even though it's not my business as I'm the founder, I am in a unique position where I can actually maybe try to repeat the kind of big ambitious goal of building kind of a successful, long-lasting business. So and so what I actually done at that point was then I spoke to my manager, the CEO and founder, and also to some external people. I'm extremely privileged that Mary Williams, the former CTO of Monzo, they are on the board of Flagstone, and so they act as an advisor. And so I discussed it with both of them, and they were both extremely supportive of, well, first of all, acknowledging that, this is normal. And then secondly, giving me the opportunity during 2025 to rediscover kind of my purpose and joy of the CTO role, especially at Flagstone, rather than doing the thing I always did in the past. Was time to move on.
So it's really interesting. So we've had Mary on our podcast, and they talked about their journey and the way in which there was some big stops, not for different reasons from you, but some big sort of points where it was like, do I do this? Do I do that? So that was really interesting that they then have turned around to be an advisor to you in a sort of a crossroads in your career. So that's really interesting. But it makes me think, and also that your CEO was willing to embrace in that conversation, because I'm sort of listening, Lee, and thinking, yeah, I think I've been there. And I usually classify it as I'm bored now. I've sort of done the hard stuff. I haven't got a challenge. I'm bored. And quite often at that point, I leave. So do you feel like, was that an option? Were you sort of like, I'm going to leave, and then you went, actually, I'll just have a chat before I do in case there's an alternative path here?
Yes, leaving was definitely one of the options I was entertaining. I had a few informal conversations with other organizations. I'm also in a very privileged position that being the CTO of a fintech of a certain size and maturity is attractive to other fintechs who also are on that growth journey. So it was easy to have a few informal conversations, but I think I was going back to that whole feeling that I finally found a company where I'm really happy, and surely there is more to be explored. And also, um, we've taken, or during my tenure, we've taken the business from 3 billion to 19 billion in assets we administer for our clients, but we are incredibly ambitious that we want to push that to 50, right? And so being part of this success story where you are not just, growing the business, but you're pretty much tripling the business again over a few years time, and the expectations on me personally and professionally, and the growth opportunity for myself, that's where I thought, you know what, this is worth at least entertaining, because of course there was always a risk if I raised this with our CEO that he would probably think red flag, I need to start thinking about a plan B.
Yeah. It's really interesting, sort of, as you say, hearing what's changed in terms of your perspective on, the challenges, the opportunities that you have in front of you in that position. And have you recognized any change in yourself? Do you feel that you're a different CTO? What have you kept? What's shifted? Do you do anything different in terms of challenges you say no to, challenges that you're more interested in approaching? Like, what has that experience been, that shift in you after going through that journey of making a decision to stay and see it through?
Yeah, so it took me most of 2025 to rediscover the passion, but that was also because I completed our major 16-month replatforming project October 2024, and I think it's fair to say that I was probably still dealing with some sort of burnout from a very high intense type of project over 16 months. But it was also a period where I got a lot of support from my peers on the exec team, who have chipped in any way possible, in every way possible, to help me deliver this project. So I also felt like 2025 was for me the year to return the favor and make sure that my primary goal was to support everyone else around me. And in a way, that was a blessing in disguise, because there wasn't really a major, big, bold, ambitious goal for me to pursue. It was very much like, well, let's deal with the fact that we're now on a new platform and we kind of almost reinvented the business. There's still a lot more of the work to be done. Why don't you sort out the things you need to sort? And essentially, my CEO said, well, 2025 is the year where you figure it out, and then we'll go again for the next few years until we get to that 50 billion assets under administration. And so, in trying to figure out the things that was holding me back, what was my goal as well. And so one of those was the realization that I didn't really have any mental bandwidth to actually focus on the things that are important as a CTO. So um, it's not about the number of hours you have available. Everyone can make an hour or two available during a day here and there. But it's not because you have a couple of hours available that you also have the mental bandwidth to then use those couple of hours for strategic thinking. And I quickly figured out that my problem was I was both constantly jumping between dealing with the here and now and the BAU and incidents and decision making, but also trying to look at the next 2 to 3 year type of strategic direction of the business. And mentally jumping between those two 10 times on a daily basis is exhausting. And so that was one of the big investments I've done in my team and on myself in 25, is make sure I have a strong engineering leadership that can just look after the tech work, so I can actually focus on those big things. And that's what really started to free up the capacity to then start thinking about all the other things I need to resolve during the year, so I can start 2026 with this is my perfect job.
I think, Lee, this is going to be really interesting. We'll come to any advice you'll give in a little while to our listeners. But you're touching on a couple of things there. First of all, you said at the start of that point, you got a lot of support during while you were doing this big system replatform. You got a lot of support from your peers and your CEO and stuff like that. That's not to be taken for granted, right? So many people aren't able to say that, right? So it really sounds like that was a valuable part of your journey. Also, that must make it mean that, and this is good feedback for you, that they valued what you were able to give to the company, right? They wouldn't have, they weren't just, humoring you, right? They understood that you'd done some good stuff for the company. It enabled them to get to a point, and now you need a little bit of, thinking, a little bit of time to work out the next thing. So, we've talked on this podcast before about high performing leadership teams and your number one team and all that kind of stuff. It sounds like you had a great leadership team and some peer-to-peer relationships there. So that's really good. And if our listeners don't have that in their organization, then they should always try and seek it out or develop that amongst their peers, would be my first point. And then the other thing that really you touched on there is that strategic thinking space, and that came not from your inability to do strategic thinking, but your lack of capacity to do it on a moment by moment basis. And again, that plays to organizational design. So I'm guessing from what you've said, you brought in the next level around you and the teams that sit under them to make sure they could take some of that day-to-day necessary responsibilities off of you so that you could do the strategic thing. How did that go, Lee, right? How did you, when you got to the point where you went, right, I've got support of my peers, that's great. I know I need my team to maybe step up one level and take away some of this stuff from me so I can do the bigger. How did that conversation go? Did you pull them all in the room and say you're all promoted? Did you give everybody extra pay rises? Did you just say, I'm not doing that shit anymore, you've got to do it? How did that conversation go, Lee?
So 2025 for us was a big year of headcount growth. So in that year, we grew from 300 to 400 people. So 100 extra people, you grow the business by a third. So that changes the dynamic, culture,
Sure.
process, everything. So I think it's fair to say that part of this was forced on me, as in I just can't continue in the way we were operating. And I'd like to say that I had this a kind of brilliant insight ahead of time that this is the exact first thing I need to fix. It was my hand was forced, as in you can't continue. So luckily, it was clear that one of the first priorities was to bring in strong leadership to supplement what we had, because we just had a shortage of kind of senior level leadership talent. And very coincidentally, through one of my CTO networks, I was introduced to someone who just became available, and it was one of those kind of very coincidence, chance encounters where everything seemed to work out perfectly. That person could literally join in a matter of weeks, which completely changed the game for my hiring and then freeing up my capacity. And so again, and another learning for everyone is really around make sure you continue invest in your networks and peer networks and industry networks and because that's often, as we all know, is often where some of the best referrals and people and introductions and opportunities come from.
That is true.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And I mean, what advice would you have for um, someone going through the same journey as you, the same sort of challenges? Someone else is sort of stuck in the position they're in at the moment. They're saying, well, I don't really love what's happening in my CTO. I don't love the way it's playing out for me. I mean, is there anything that you've learned from your journey that you would share with other people experiencing the same challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it's related. So two things would be, the first one is you do need to believe in the future of the company, because there is nothing more demotivating working on something where you are very clear, you know what, there is no future in this business or team or organization or this role. So that's the first thing you need to figure out. Do I believe, whether I'm the right person or not is a separate question, but do I believe that this team, this organization is the right business for me? And do I believe that this team and organization is going to be successful in whatever your window of horizon is? And then I think once you've made that decision, what helped me is then thinking about, okay, so how do I fit into that picture? So I historically always set my OKRs quarterly, very much on, what do we do next quarter? And my CEO started challenging me on, you need to have a much longer kind of horizon, right? So forcing a full year OKR, or forcing making your strategic plans for the next 3 years rather than what are we going to do the next 6 months, also really helps with that change in thinking. Because if you don't believe in the future of the business and you can't articulate, what is an exciting vision for the next 2 to 3 years, then probably should give you a cue of, is this really a right fit for you? And luckily, I had the opportunity to do this, and the support from the CEO and the rest of the exec team to do this. But that would be the first thing you need to figure out for yourself. Do you really want to be in it or not? Because it's also not fair for the people around you and the business that employs you if you are
Yeah.
kind of just scooting along and not really sure what you want to do.
I think that's definitely true. I think that that everybody deserves a little bit of time to work it out, right? And especially if you've proved your worth, if you've delivered something of value to an organization, everybody should be getting a go. But you have to have an amount of self-awareness as well, Lee, right? You have to lock that in and go, okay, am I just posting here and taking the salary? And it's like I've done some good stuff in the past, and we've all had that. We've all had a bit of like, well, I just delivered real value to the company. You guys, I'll let you catch up while I just rest a bit, sort of thing. So I think we all get an element of that, but at some point you do look around, and my wife hates it when I do this. I look around an organization and think, am I done? Can I give more here? Is there and on 4 separate occasions throughout my career, I've gone, yeah, I'm done. Right. I've done what I can, not because I hated it, but just because I was like, I don't think I'm the guy to take them where they need to go, or they're not going to go big enough for another
Yep.
challenge. And that self-awareness is really, really critical. I can't help confessingly, I'm a little jealous, if I'm honest, right? I think you clearly you're a capable individual and a great CTO leader, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. But I'm a bit jealous that your company seems to have given you, and your employees and your team seems to have given you so much support to allow you to work this out. Do you think that's unusual in industry? Do you think, and I would say your company would say they're benefiting from it. I'm guessing they would all agree with that. So do you think it's unusual in our industry for such sort of tolerance and understanding?
I would definitely agree that it's probably not um, mainstream on the same level of empathy and support. But I think it is like, if I had gone through a bit this kind of existential crisis earlier in my tenure at Flagstone, I'm pretty certain that my CEO would have scratched his head and wondered, like, did we hire the right person, type of thing. I think because of the track record of making big impactful decisions and delivering those projects, bought me some more leeway, I guess. But this could have panned out very differently, right? My CEO could have decided, you know what, it's been great. You've been here 3 years. You've made a big impact. We probably need to look for someone else right now, because clearly you're not going to make this big jump to the next 5 years. So I am, extremely lucky that I am in that environment. But I would say part of it is created through showing that impact. And so whilst I'm not saying that every CEO will be as understanding and give you the time to figure it out, I think if you've delivered your value and everyone is kind of rock solid, kind of convinced that you're the right person, then I think the support will be there.
It sounds like there's an amazing mutuality, and you had a sort of a strong appreciation and an enjoyment of working at Flagstone, and they've clearly had the same for you, which is a really nice kind of mutual relationship. Just briefly, I'm interested in something you mentioned earlier, just because it's a question that comes up again and again when we host our events. You mentioned something around shifting your time horizons from almost quarterly to 1 year or 3 years, and that's something we hear really often, mostly around, how do I do it if I'm used to working on slightly shorter timescales? What is the shift in thinking? What are the tips and tricks I can use to make myself more comfortable with those longer horizons? Would you have any advice for our audience who are facing that sort of challenge, Lee?
Yeah, the best investment you can make is build a strong team around you, because otherwise you will never get the bandwidth. And so one of the things I'm still struggling occasionally, and I've told my team to slap me on the hands for it, is that I'm sometimes still too keen to be involved in the day to day. And recently my engineering director asked for some advice on something that he wanted to do, and I immediately jumped into my old habit of giving him advice on, well, you probably should do this and ABC, and then I stopped myself and said, like, actually, this is your call. I'm grateful that you get my counsel and advice, but it's your call, because if it doesn't work out, then you're the one that has to deal with it, right? So and that would be the single best investment, even if it means that you need to deprioritize other hires or other initiative or investments. Having strong one or two leaders that you can 100% trust, everything else will follow, right? Because once you have that in place, you can expand your horizon. And once you expand your horizon, you can then create space to think more strategically about, what is the future of AI for this business, or what is the future of data. So yeah, invest in your direct team, and be very honest with yourself if the org structure and the team isn't the right fit. So we had to make changes in the way we've structured the organization to make this possible. And those are not always the easiest decisions to be made, of course.
They're not. I think that you clearly got a large team, and I think in a large team sometimes those decisions are easier to make because it's less personal. You're sort of moving parts of the organization around, and people get it. When it's a smaller organization, and a lot of our listeners will be in a small organization, it can get a lot more personal, and so that's always a difficult challenge to navigate. My lens on that is always that I think, well, if I don't make this decision here, I'll be letting these people down. So it's more about the people who remain or whose jobs stay the same rather than the people who leave or their jobs change. But it's always a difficult one.
Lee, it sounds like you've been through a real journey of falling out of love and then falling back in love and reestablishing your position as the CTO. So now you're all settled. What are you focusing on now with Flagstone?
So because the investment I've made in changing my focus from the now to more the future, created that capacity, start planning more long term. I've also been able to create much more narrow OKRs, which sounds slightly counterintuitive, because as a CTO, you'd probably have much broader type of strategic OKR. So the thing that I've challenged myself is something that we've all been thinking about, is the impact of AI on businesses like Flagstone. Every business has this question. And the thing that I find quite exciting, but also it is scary, but I guess being scared and being excited are very similar type of emotional kind of responses. Is we have seen big transformational technology changes through in the past couple of decades, right? Think about the internet, the World Wide Web, smartphones, social media. But with each of those, we often had 10, 20, 30 years to adapt as a society and adapt as businesses to the opportunity. And when you look at AI technology, it's been around for a long time, but if you look at the past 6 months, the pace of change, if you just look at where we were with engineering productivity co-pilots before Christmas and after Christmas, that's already kind of a whole massive shift in that short period of time. And I always joke to people like it's advancing at such a rapid pace that by the time I start and finish an article, by the time I finish, things have already changed and the article is outdated. Right. And that creates both an exciting opportunity, but also it's quite a scary one. And that's the bit I'm focusing on right now is how do we leverage the technology, not only for internal productivity end to end, the software development life cycle, but also thinking about we will need to fundamentally rethink the way we architect systems. Right. Some of it will be generated by AI and will never have a human touching it, because if you want to change it, well, we'll just regenerate that specific bit of software. And so that is what I'm focusing on right now. So not only for our internal processes, but also what does that mean for our clients? What does that mean for the kind of savings industry, financial services industry? So yeah, and I can hand on heart say that this type of being at the forefront of tech innovation again, rather than what we discussed earlier around the quote unquote boring legacy replatforming, is quite exciting.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it certainly
Amazing.
sounds like you've got your excitement back, Lee, that's for sure. So it is nice to hear a journey from somebody who, can confess that they, maybe sort of fell out of love a little bit, or maybe the romance died, who knows. But then you regathered yourself, got lots of support from your colleagues, and have managed to get your head into the future and see what you and the CTO role can move forward with. So that's really great. I think our audience will love hearing you on the panel. I'm sure you'll get some people who've got other experiences and other views. So it'd be really, really great to hear about all of that. We hope to see you at the event and lots of others. But thanks very much for joining us, Lee. It's been really great chat.
Thanks, Lee.
Fabulous. Thank you, Sophie, David. It was really good. Thank you.
I think we are going to invite the Quizmaster extraordinaire back from his gallivanting around the world to come and join us for a little bit of the mid-episode game. Here he is.
Hey.
Fresh from the ski slopes of, I don't know, where did you go? Anyway, no.
Yeah, I went to Teen, which if I was trying to impress our listeners, I would say it's Val d'Isère, but it's actually just the little village next to it. So yeah, nothing too fancy, but a nice trip all in all. So yeah, but I'm glad to be back. How are you guys?
Doing
Good.
well. I'd like to say we missed you, but we didn't. We had fun with Will instead. So.
And who's been winning recently? Pretending like I have watched the episodes.
Don't ask. Don't ask.
I may be ahead overall, but Sophie is definitely, she's fighting. She's fighting.
Well, Sophie, just like me on the ski slopes, never give up. Eventually, you'll get there. But anyway, it's time for this week's game, which is called
Touchdown Tech Leaders.
So this week we are playing Touchdown Tech Leaders. As some of you sports fans who are our listeners, you may have heard that the Super Bowl was on last night and the Seahawks came out victorious. However, we thought that we would try and get our tech leaders to score some touchdowns today through anagrams. So coming up are 7 anagrams of some of the biggest companies in tech that you will definitely know. I can promise you that. So it's not too difficult. When we get to the next slide, I will read out the letters for our audio listeners. But if you do want to go and watch on YouTube, feel free to tune in for this part, as it might be a little bit better. But I will read out the letters in the anagram, as then whoever can get the anagram first will get the touchdown. The person with most touchdowns at the end of the game will be the winner. Okay, cool. So let's get into the first play.
AWS.
I didn't even get to read out the letters. I think we need to have a word with production.
Should we do like a hand raising system or something?
No, that's fine. I think it has some comedic value. Yes, SAW was AWS. So well done, Sophie. I think you just about got that one. Right, on to the next play. WKSNFALOE.
I have to sort of sit back a bit to read to see all the letters. Snowflake.
Snowflake.
Oh,
That was a draw.
I actually think David got in first.
Oh, damn it.
Sorry. I
No,
heard
fair
David
enough.
first. You can blame your internet connection.
Okay, I will.
On to the next play, 1-1. OGGLOE.
Go on, Sophie. You have your hand up first.
Thank you so much. Google.
Yes, correct. Cool. 2 touchdowns for Sophie, 1 for David. Next play. COLERA.
It's harder when it's a sort of a real word.
Yeah, exactly, because it just confuses you.
I did think when I wrote this one, it sounds a bit like the disease, and I thought that will challenge them. Sophie?
Oracle.
Correct. Whoa.
Hold on, couldn't see that
David,
one.
you did say you're going to struggle on this one.
Yeah, I'm no good at this.
3-1 to Sophie. On to the next play. OFTMOSICR.
David, you want to go?
Microsoft.
Correct. Maybe that one was too easy.
Yeah, that was
3 touchdowns to Sophie, 2 touchdowns to David. Here we go. On to the next play. ENOAIP.
it looks like piano, but
Yeah. Pinoy. Panyo. Noyer.
Yeah. We're sounding great for our audio listeners. We just sound like we've got a bit.
The internet
How hard
connection
can
is
this
gone.
be?
ENOAIP.
Is it Nope AI?
It has those letters in.
Yeah, thanks.
You had it. You had the 2 words correct. I need you to get this for the tiebreaker.
Oh, so one word is AI,
Yes.
and so they're the there's Nope,
Pinot.
Pone, Open. Oh, Open AI, blood.
Oh.
There we go. That touchdown was a bit more delayed.
Oh, God.
David, you managed to say AI opened at one point, and I was like,
Oh, did I?
That
Did
was
I?
a switch
Oh,
those round
no.
around. But it's okay. We are tied going into the final drive of the game. So we're looking for the last touchdown of the game, and let's see who's going to take it. Remember, one of the biggest companies in tech you could ever think of.
Oh.
Is it all of the letters mixed up, or are they like
it's
3 words?
3 words, this one.
Oh, yes, got it.
Would you like to say
I
it?
don't.
London Tech Leaders.
Correct.
Oh.
Another comeback win for David.
Oh, man. I was trying to work out what had etch in the middle of it.
Yeah, London Tech Leaders, one of the biggest companies you'll find in tech, that's for
Exactly.
sure.
Big brand, mega
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
very
no,
important.
that concludes today's game, our Super Bowl themed anagram Touchdown Tech Leaders. Thank you both for playing, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Luke.
Welcome back.
Hi. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. We've lost David momentarily, so you've got just me to take us through a disaster diary. So today we have been written to by Anonymous, and Anonymous is having a challenge with their board. So I will read out the disaster diary and then share some thoughts for our Anonymous challenge sender, and hopefully there'll be something helpful in there. So this week's disaster diary says, I'm struggling to get the board on side when it comes to technology. I talk about platforms, resilience, and how we need to change and innovate. They talk about whether what we have is good enough for now. And it feels like we're solving different problems. And I'm the only one worried about the future. Some of the board are set in their ways. They have built this company without modern tech, and I don't think they fully trust it. Every time I push for change, it feels like I'm asking for permission rather than setting direction. So the question they're asking us is, it would be great to know whether there are any practical ways to get the board more on your side, or alternatively, how do you know when walking away may be the smartest move? So I think this is a really interesting question, and it's actually one that we spent a lot of time talking about on our most recent Women Plus Tech Leaders event, where we were basically talking about dealing with the board. So it's absolutely not an uncommon problem. I think a lot of people face it, and particularly it sounds like it makes sense that if you have a group of people who've built a company, they haven't needed to rely on technology. and they're now potentially transitioning into a phase where technology is very important, there's a little bit of reticence or lack of connection to that problem, or lack of understanding really of what the opportunity is. Interestingly, for our broader group of listeners, we have heard that this can go both ways. Sometimes you have a board who say, I'm not sure about technology. It worked okay before. Why do we need to introduce this? What we're hearing from a lot of boards, on the other hand, at the moment, is that they're hearing about AI and they're getting really, really excited and saying, well, why can't we ship AI tomorrow and we can use it in all of these different areas? And of course, AI is much more complicated than that. And so I'm hoping this advice that we've gathered will be helpful for both situations where there's reticence towards technology or where there's almost too much excitement around technology that needs to be reeled in a little bit. I think the first piece of advice, and this was something that came through really strongly in that last Women Plus Tech Leaders event, is to make what you're trying to communicate as a technology leader as accessible as possible to the board, bearing in mind what their perspective is. And that can both be where they're most comfortable, what areas of the business they understand the most. It may be commercial or strategy much more than it's technology. It could also be just, the way that they talk. Are they sort of storytellers themselves? And so you need to present this as a story rather than a list of facts. Or maybe there's someone, maybe your CFO, for example, is really comfortable with numbers. And so you want to translate the challenges or the opportunities you see into numbers more than a story. That can vary on a very individual basis. But importantly, really importantly, it's worth bearing in mind, what do the board actually care about? So that could be business growth, it could be the valuation of the business, it could be regulatory risk, it could be a whole number of different factors. So I think the challenge, for this person who's written in, is to really try to tell their story, communicate what they're saying in a way that's translated into what the board cares about. So what can you say about the technology that relates to, the impact on the bottom line, or risk for, challenges hitting the headlines? Cybersecurity risk affects company. Can you translate it into customer experiences, for example? Something that we talked about on our previous panel was really explaining the cost of doing nothing, because often people might not appreciate that there is a cost of doing nothing. And you sort of say, well, it's been working the way it's been working so far brilliantly, but actually the world is changing around you. The competitive landscape is changing. The technology advantages that competitors are embracing or that customers are expecting are evolving. So there is always a cost of doing nothing. And sometimes it's just a question of really reinforcing that explicitly with the board to help them understand it. But you might pull out phrases along the lines of, for example, a single point of failure here within this tech system that I'm trying to address could stop revenue for X number of hours, and the impact on revenue would be Y, for example. That's, numbers that might be easier to for the board to appreciate. You might say the system cannot support, a new product we want to build, or a regulatory change that's coming, or an increase in volume that we're expecting, which is going to cap our growth. That's something that the board are likely to resonate much more with. We need to improve the system. Or you might have a person risk. You might say, well, we need to hire these people because at the moment only 2 people understand the system. And if they're both sick or something happens, then, our whole ability to kind of even just maintain the system is going to fall out. Another challenge that you might be facing is this legacy of the board themselves, having been involved in sort of developing the infrastructure of the company previously. And whenever you're trying to make a change, it can be a real challenge to sort of say, well, we want to do something different, but that doesn't mean that we're trying to criticize what's been done so far. And one opportunity here is to really anchor the future to the legacy that the board have previously created, and not to critique it. So you want to avoid saying things like, what has been built so far is not good enough, and focus more on saying things like, what you've built has got us here. That's what's going to stop, the whole structure becoming fragile, but there's further opportunity that we can pursue. Obviously, this is really hard to do because you want to speak honestly rather than feeling that you're guarding your words. So really kind of practicing this narrative and getting comfortable with it is something that can help. Another challenge that this writer mentioned was the challenge, the difference really between asking permission to do something, which it sounds like is not getting you very far, unfortunately. One shift you can make is moving towards presenting different options with consequences. So instead of asking, can we invest in this particular feature or this particular platform or infrastructure, what you can do is say, here are 3 paths for the next, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. This is what each of them will cost, and this is what each of them will enable or prevent. And one path could be focused on maintenance, one path could be focused on incremental investment, and one potentially on more transformational growth. So rather than saying yes or no to one particular feature or platform investment, you're providing 3 opportunities, and all of them are ones that, based on your experience and your expertise in the area, are going to be viable, but ultimately a choice needs to be made. And just responding to the final part of your question, how can you tell when this is something that's a healthy tension or a strategic misalignment? Really having these discussions that we sort of outlined in the first part of the section, starting to see what the responses are, how far can you move, how much is your board open to listening. Something we heard in our interview with Lee earlier in the segment is that sometimes you come into an organization and you realize that actually the challenges that the organization wants to focus on are different to the challenges that you can support with. And when you start to sense that reality, that's really the time when ultimately what you're discovering is a strategic misalignment. But if you pursue all of the sort of opportunities to further that conversation mentioned in this section, and you start to see movement and progress and an evolution of the way you can collaborate with your board and their openness to invest in technology, then that's when you see what you've had as a healthy tension and it's something you're overcoming. So thank you so much for writing in. If anyone else does have a disaster diary, please do send it to us. We love trying to help where we can and to read about all of your challenges. So please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know what's on your mind.
So great week. We had a brilliant guest, Lee Provoost, on and talked all about falling back in love with the CTO role. That was really good. We had our usual run through of the technology. Undoubtedly, everybody will be talking about the items that we covered, Sophie, as is our trend. And the disaster diaries, I think that was a good one that you led us through there, Sophie. Thank you for that. And of course, the mid-episode game continues to be a highlight of the whole thing, and we won't talk about scores. But yes. Yeah, I think that's our week done. Sophie, thanks ever so much for joining. I think we had a good chat through.
We did. It was great. Thank you so much, David. Although not thank you for beating me in the mid-episode game. But yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening all the way through, and we will catch you next week.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.